Everything you know about Hades and Persephone's love story is wrong. You've probably heard that Hades was this evil god who kidnapped an innocent young goddess. But what if I told you that's not the real story? The truth is way more complicated. This isn't just another boring myth. It's the story that explains why our world has seasons. And it's probably the most misunderstood love story in all of Greek mythology. Let me introduce you to our main characters. First, we have Hades. Now forget everything you've seen in movies or games. He wasn't some evil villain with blue fire for hair. Hades was the most mature and stable of all the Greek gods. Think about it. While Zeus was up there causing chaos and having affairs, Hades was down in the underworld, just doing his job and keeping things running smoothly. Then there's Persephone. Everyone pictures her as this helpless flower girl trapped in a bad situation. But here's the thing. She became one of the most powerful goddesses in all of Greek mythology. She wasn't just the goddess of spring flowers anymore. She became the queen of the underworld. And trust me, the queen knew exactly what she was doing. This all happened long ago in ancient Greece, when gods regularly walked among humans. The world was divided into three parts: the sky ruled by Zeus, the sea by Poseidon, and the underworld by Hades. But the earth? That was where our story really begins. It was the kingdom of Demeter, Persephone's mother, who made sure everything grew and flourished. What happened next changed everything, not just for these gods but for every living thing on earth. And the real reason behind it all surprises you. Part 1. Before the meeting. Before everything changed, Persephone's life was pretty much perfect. At least, that's what everyone thought. She spent her days with her mom, Demeter, walking through endless fields of flowers under warm sunlight. There was no darkness, no problems, just a mother and daughter spreading life everywhere they went. But here's something interesting. Persephone was more than just some girl who picked flowers all day. She had real power. Wherever she walked, things would grow. Not just regular flowers, but plants no one had ever seen before. She could make entire meadows bloom with just a touch. And everyone loved her. The nymphs, the humans, even the other gods couldn't help but smile when she was around. Meanwhile, in the underworld, Hades lived a completely different life. Imagine being stuck in an endless night, surrounded by shadows and spirits. While everyone up above was having fun and hanging out together, Hades was stuck doing probably the hardest job of all the gods, dealing with dead souls. Day after day, judging spirits, maintaining order, making sure no one escaped back to the world of the living. And that's the crazy thing. While Persephone's world was all about creating new life, Hades' world was all about managing the end of it. Up above, everything was bright, warm, and alive. The air smelled like flowers, and you could hear birds singing everywhere. But down below, the only light came from ghost fire torches, and the only sounds were the whispers of lost souls. Think about it. These two couldn't have been more different. Persephone had never known a moment of darkness or loneliness. Hades had almost forgotten what the sun felt like. She was surrounded by life and growth, while he was surrounded by death and endings. She had her mom watching her every move, while Hades? He ruled an entire realm but had no one to share it with. But sometimes, the biggest differences create the strongest connections. Neither knew it yet, but their worlds were about to collide in a way that would change everything. Not just for them, but for the world as a whole. Let me tell you what happened next, because this is where things get interesting. Part 2. The Fateful Meeting. Now, this is where the story takes a wild turn. See, Hades had been watching Persephone from his dark kingdom below, and for the first time in his endless life, he felt something different, lonely. But Hades wasn't like his brother Zeus, who just took whatever he wanted. No, he went and asked Zeus for permission to marry Persephone. Here's the part that changes everything. Zeus said yes. Behind Demeter's back, these two brothers made a deal that would flip everyone's lives upside down. Zeus knew his daughter's mom would never agree, so he came up with this messed up plan. And Hades, well, he was so desperate for company that he went along with it. So there was Persephone, having what seemed like just another normal day. She was in this incredible meadow with her friends, picking flowers she'd made grow herself. The sun was shining, and birds were singing. It was the usual perfect day. She spotted this flower she'd never seen before, a narcissus. It was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. But that flower? It was a trap. The moment Persephone reached for it, everything went wild. The ground started shaking, then literally split wide open. Earth emerged from this massive crack, riding this black earthot pulled by these huge shadow-black horses. Their eyes were glowing red, and their hooves didn't touch the ground. In just seconds, before anyone could even scream for help, Hades had scooped up Persephone and was racing back down into the darkness. The ground sealed up behind them like nothing had ever happened. One minute she was in the sunniest meadow you could imagine. The next, she was heading straight down to the darkest place. The nymphs who were with her were freaking out. They ran to tell Demeter, but by then, it was too late. Persephone was gone, taken to a place where no living god had ever gone before. And this wasn't just any kidnapping. This was the moment leading to the creation of seasons, though nobody knew it yet. The crazy part? This was just the beginning of the story. What happened next in the underworld? Well, that's where things get even more interesting. Part 3. The Search. When Demeter found out her daughter was missing, she lost it. And I mean, who wouldn't? Her only daughter had vanished without a trace. But when a goddess loses it, things get way worse than just a regular mom freaking out. Demeter went completely crazy trying to find Persephone. She turned herself into an old woman and walked through every town and village, asking everyone if they'd seen her daughter. She walked so much that her feet were bleeding, but she didn't care. She wasn't going to stop until she found Persephone. But here's where things got really bad for everyone else. Demeter wasn't just any goddess. She was in charge of growing things, and she was so upset that she stopped doing her job entirely. The crops? They started dying. The trees lost their leaves. The grass turned brown. And for the first time, the world felt cold. This wasn't like winter today where we know spring is coming. No, this was different. Nothing would grow. At all. Anywhere. People started running out of food. They couldn't farm anymore. Their animals were dying because there wasn't anything for them to eat. Humans began starving to death, and they had no idea why this was happening to them. But there was one god who had seen everything. Helios, the sun god. He saw everything that happened during the day, and he'd watched the whole thing go down. For a long time he stayed quiet, but seeing everyone suffering, watching babies cry from hunger, he couldn't take it anymore. So he went to Demeter and told her the truth. Your daughter wasn't just taken by anyone. It was Hades. And Zeus? He knew about it. He gave Hades permission to take her. When Demeter heard this, her sadness turned into pure rage. Her own brother had helped plan her daughter's kidnapping. But what made her even angrier was realizing where Persephone was, in the one place Demeter couldn't go, the underworld. And now Demeter had a choice to make. Either accept that her daughter was gone, or make the whole world suffer until she got her back. And let me tell you, an angry mom with the power to control all life on Earth? That's not something even Earth could Earth for long. The world was breathing, waiting to see what would happen next. And trust me, what happened in the underworld during all this? That's the part that's going to blow your mind. Part 4. Life in the Underworld. When Persephone first arrived in the underworld, she was thrown into a completely different world. Gone were the sunny meadows and singing birds. Instead, she was surrounded by darkness, ghost fire torches, and the whispers of dead souls. Anyone would have been terrified, and at first, she was. But here's where the story gets interesting. Hades wasn't anything like the monster everyone made him out to be. He gave Persephone her huge room filled with precious gems that glowed like stars. He didn't lock her up or treat her like a prisoner. Instead, he offered her something no one had before. Actual power. See? Up above, Persephone was just the goddess of flowers, living in her mom's shadow. But down here, Hades offered to make her his queen. Not just his wife, but an equal queen of 1/3 of the world. That's why queens started to change. Day by day, Persephone started seeing the underworld differently. She realized it wasn't just some scary place of death. It was about balance, justice, and endings, creating new beginnings. And Hades? He was probably the only god who took his job seriously and didn't mess around with mortals for fun. Then came the moment that changed everything. The pomegranate. There's a rule in the underworld. If you eat anything there, you must stay forever. Hades offered Persephone this bright red pomegranate. And here's the thing everyone gets wrong. She knew exactly what would happen if she ate it. This wasn't some trick. Persephone was smart. She knew the rules, and she made a choice. She ate 6 seeds. Not the whole thing. Just 6 seeds. Some people say she did it because she was hungry, but come on. She was a goddess. She didn't need to eat. The truth? Persephone had found something in the underworld she never had up above. Independence. Down here, she wasn't just someone's daughter. She was becoming her person, making her own choices. She was becoming something more powerful than just a flower goddess, the queen of the underworld. And just when Queen was starting to embrace her new role, that's when everything was about to change again. Queen Zeus's actions, up above her mom's, forced Zeus to make a decision that would affect everyone. Part 5. The Divine Compromise. Things were getting seriously out of hand on Earth. People were dying, and even Zeus could not ignore it anymore. Finally, he had to step in, not because he could do much about humans, but because without humans, who would worship the gods? Yeah, even Zeus had his priorities straight when it came to that. So Zeus sent Hermes down to the underworld with a message: bring Persephone back, or the whole world is going to die. But here's where it gets complicated. Remember those pomegranate seeds? That's when everyone found out Persephone had eaten them. And Demeter, she completely lost it when she heard. Demeter demanded her daughter back full-time, and no questions were asked. But Hades wasn't having it. He knew the rules of the underworld were absolute. Even Zeus couldn't change them. If you eat the food of the dead, you belong to the dead. 6 seeds meant Persephone was tied to the underworld, whether Demeter liked it. But check this out. Persephone wasn't just sitting there letting everyone else decide her fate. She spoke up. She had an idea that would change the world forever. Since she ate 6 seeds, she'd spend 6 months in the underworld and 6 months above ground with her mom. This was bigger than just some custody arrangement. When Persephone was with Hades, Demeter would be sad and stop things from growing. That's what we call fall and winter. But when Persephone returned, her mom would be so happy that everything would bloom again, giving us spring and summer. And that's how seasons were born, not because of some random weather pattern, but because of a love story. A deal struck between death and life, darkness and light. Every time you see the leaves change color, or the first flowers bloom in spring, you watch this story play out again. The crazy part? Persephone ended up with the best of both worlds. She's the gentle goddess of spring for half the year, bringing life with her mom. But for the other half, she's the powerful queen of the underworld, ruling over Queen with Hades. Talk about a career upgrade. This wasn't just some random happy ending. It was the beginning of the natural cycle Queen'll see today. And Persephone? She turned out to be way smarter than anyone gave her credit for. She turned what could have been a tragedy into real power. Conclusion. So, remember how I told you at the start that everything you knew about this story was wrong? Well, now you know the real deal. This wasn't just some kidnapping gone bad. It was the story of how a young goddess found her power and changed the world forever. Think about it. Persephone went from being Demeter's daughter to one of the most powerful goddesses ever. She didn't stay that simple flower girl everyone thought she was. Instead, she became something new, the queen of the underworld who could wall queen both light and shadow. Every year, when the leaves start falling and the air gets cold, Persephone heads back to her other throne in the underworld. And when you yo Queen Ho's first flowers push through the snow every spring, that's her coming back up, bringing life with her. This story shows us something pretty deep about love. Sometimes it comes in ways we don't expect. Sometimes, what looks like a tragedy at first can become something powerful. Persephone and Hades didn't have a perfect fairy tale romance, but ended up with something real. Next time you watch the seasons change, remember, you're not just seeing weather patterns. You're watching one of the most powerful love stories ever told play out all over again, just like it has for thousands of years.